Welcome to the Legal Stelza podcast.
David, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Angela.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you. For everyone listening, David Thompson is an elitely experienced lawyer who is a senior partner at his firm and has been for decades. Dave has grown his team from, I think, about 3 lawyers when I worked there 15 years ago. What are you up to, about 18 or 20 now?
Yep, 18. I have 2 more young lawyers starting in the summer, so we'll be at 20.
You'll be at 20. Fun disclosure for everyone listening. Dave was my very first boss out of law school when I knew a little bit less than nothing. Taught me most of what I know now, although, the grasshopper has grown up a little bit, so I'm making some of my own jumps. But the most important thing that David did for me was give me the confidence, because he was 100% genuine in saying this, that I could turn to him anytime I needed to, that I could ask questions anytime I was unsure of something, anytime if he gave me a task to do or if someone else did, and I wasn't sure on how to approach it, didn't understand the problem, didn't understand the question, or wasn't sure the best way to respond. He truly meant it. I was able to turn to him and ask all of the questions, and he never made me feel like I was an imposition or that my questions were stupid or, how could you be so silly not to know that? Never, ever at all. It was always 100% comfortable. Dave, I guess thank you is a good place to start after that one.
Well, thank you for those kind words, Angela. That's very nice. I've always maintained that, true mentoring, it has to be a completely open door process. It has to be genuine if it's going to be effective. As I've progressed in my career, I have really come to really enjoy mentoring. And, little bit of an honest admission, I will say that early on, mentoring, as I started to grow my team, because I hadn't fully embraced it, there was some pain associated with it because I often felt like the time I was spending hopefully teaching someone how to do something was greater than the time I could have spent doing the task myself. And I needed to resist the temptation to simply say, I should just do this myself because it will be quicker. And as soon as I embraced the realization that the time spent was valuable, then mentoring became much more enjoyable. So I've tried to proceed with that type of philosophy because it is really the only philosophy that breeds success and achieves hopefully results for both mentor and mentee.
I completely agree with you that it is an investment to make you and your team more efficient and productive, and then I guess eventually, although I don't think you're ever going to decide to, give you the opportunity to kind of step back and say, hey, I'm gonna go float around on a boat for 6 months, and all you minions, you got it from here. Call me if you need anything.
Yeah.
I don't see you ever doing that. I think that sometimes I feel like a vacation over 4 days seems a bit torturous for you.
There's probably some truth to that, Edge. But I'm one of those, I love that Confucius line, and you've heard me say it before, find a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I'm one of those incredibly fortunate individuals. I sort of fell into the practice of law more by accident and by chance than by good planning. But as it worked out, I absolutely loved it from day one. And here I am 35 years later, still loving it just as much as I did at the beginning.
It's nice to hear. It's really nice to hear. You see by this podcast, I'm trying to implement law. I don't think I ever want to stop practicing. I mean, by ever, I'm talking about, until we're somewhat retirement age. But I do like the options that it gives you different things. Like right now, I get to have fantastic conversations every week with lawyers, with not only lawyers, but people who support us in mental health wellness, in physical exercise, And I think I've spoken with, some financial advisors. I might have an accountant on here at some point. I had my language teacher. I think I've got my boxing coach coming up in a couple of weeks. That to me is support. I went boxing this morning, and all of my frustration because you can love the job, but you have to admit it's still a stressful, frustrating job.
It's an incredibly stressful job. I've learned though, over time to really deal with the stress very effectively. I'm not sure I did when I was younger. There would be many days where while I loved the practice of law, many days where I would go home and go, oh my God, do I need this? Fortunately, that happens very, very infrequently today because I do manage the stress well. Exercise is, as you know from our friendship, exercise is something that's very important to me. Exercise helps me manage the stress. But I think more than anything, the practice of law for me has not only just been a profession, it's been a pursuit. And the difference is, one provides a livelihood, but the other provides satisfaction. And I've always been intellectually curious and fascinated by the law itself, by the practice of law, by advocacy, and by trying to better understand and better do what it is we're paid to do. So it's never been simply a job or a profession. It's been a pursuit and in many ways a hobby. I'm a bit of a nerd in that I often spend my free time pondering advocacy and what could make me a better lawyer. I'm sure a lot of lawyers say you're freaking crazy to do that, but that sort of turns my crank. So that is something that I do.
Actually, I have two thoughts based on what you've said. One, in terms of what makes me a better lawyer, for me, has always been communication. The way I write, the way I communicate. I don't know, maybe it's coming off of the fact that I don't like reading long-winded things if they don't need to be, but I'm very particular on how you say something affects how it's perceived, and how it's perceived is the point in my view. I don't speak to speak. I speak to affect the reception.
Agreed. And that's an enormous part of what we do, obviously. And I have spent countless hours trying to perfect both my verbal and written communication skills. Obviously, I haven't.
Can't be perfect.
You can't achieve perfection.
Can't be perfect.
Right. But
nope.
I have spent hours attempting to try to be perfect at it. And I look back at things that I said yesterday and something that I drafted last week, and I think to myself, oh, what a piece of garbage.
What is that garbage?
Yep. So it is a constant pursuit, and it's never ending. Particularly with respect to written advocacy and written materials that we're required to produce as lawyers. I like plain language communication. I like point first writing. I like using less words rather than more. I like using monosyllables rather than polysyllables. I like small words. I don't like legalese. I don't like any of that. I think that to communicate effectively, any professional ought to be simplifying the communication. To do otherwise is arrogant and pretentious. And
Exactly.
Yeah, professionals could not be arrogant and pretentious.
No.
We're a service business. We're in a service industry, and we need to communicate with people plainly and in straightforward fashion.
You want to make the person on the other end feel good about themselves and feel empowered, because then not only is it going to make them a happier person, but if they're a happier person, in my view, they're then going to be a better person to their community, and it's like a domino effect.
Agreed.
That was my second point. I want to come back to that. I know that you said that, or I heard that you said that in mentorship, you look at, my investment in this person is beneficial because, I'm going to spend more time today teaching them than I could have done it myself. But, in 2 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever, they're then going to be able to complete it with minimal or little or no help from me. So it's a better time investment. But it also makes that person feel really good about themselves.
And completely selfishly, and it makes me feel good about myself because I, perhaps somewhat arrogantly think about legacy. And I hope that, one day someone will show up at my funeral and be able to say, I learned a lot from Dave. He helped me as a young lawyer. He taught me some good lessons. And that's the type of legacy that I'm interested in. I hope that some of what I can pass on, has some permanence, maybe not, maybe permanence is too strong a word, but has some lasting effect. As a younger lawyer, I was sort of forced to figure out most of it by myself. That's not to say I didn't have mentors, but I didn't have active, engaged mentors who I could go to and ask a bunch of questions of. When I started practicing law, I was with a very small firm. The partners were incredibly busy. They didn't have time for me. I'm just a young punk, and no one had time for me. And I didn't probably assert myself on them to the degree that I should have, because I'm sure that if I had forced myself upon them, they would have spent more time. I think they figured I could figure it out on my own. And probably as a young buck, I had an overinflated sense of self-importance and intelligence that was not at all warranted, but I figured I could figure it out. I could figure it out on my own, and I probably should have been asking for help.
Maybe that confidence is, what eventually kept multiplying to allow you, to get to the stage you're at now. Because I see it in myself. Sometimes I take different things to extremes. I find when I work, sometimes I'll, want to work 10 or 12 hours. And then after that, I don't want to work for 2 days and, contest it. But it's the heights or the extreme points that I apply to everything. You said earlier, you manage stress with exercise. I've always been a big believer, and I'm lucky. My father was and is very athletic. So that was something that he implemented on us as kids. I remember him coming into the living room and just turning off the TV or unplugging the TV. Like, go outside, do something, like shut this thing off. If I go to the gym, everything else in my day works. If I don't exercise, I can't manage anything. But the same effort that I put in to my career and to my relationships and, things that are part of my career that help it, it's the same effort that got taken out on the punching bag this morning.
Right.
So I used to beat myself up over some of it, but I'm like, you can't be focused and driven in one area and expect it not to be in others. Your personality, you can apply it differently to different things, but your personality is your personality, and you can't turn it off when you want to. Like, that's just not how life is. Not how mine is.
I agree. For most people, when it comes to those personality traits, compartmentalizing doesn't really apply. It's more holistic, right? If you have someone who is driven in athletics, they're probably driven in other parts of their life. If you have someone who's driven in academics, they're probably driven in other parts of their lives. Certainly we all have aptitude in different areas, but the drive, the work ethic, the habits, all of those types of things are probably consistent across the board in most individuals, in my experience.
I think so too. The effort was shutting it off of the one, like my friend said a while ago, she's like, I went for a glass of wine. I'm like, what is one glass of wine? I'm like, you mean like at least 2, right? She's like, oh, the wine that I didn't finish last week and I ended up throwing. I'm like, really? I'm like, people actually do that? What is 5 ounces? Because I don't think that's a thing. I think that's what happens at the vineyard for you taste a few different ones.
I agree.
So, as a younger lawyer, and that's where athletics really helped me, because when I'd be frustrated and in myself in situations, whatever, it's like, hey, this is not the time to have a glass of wine. You're not going to manage your stress with alcohol, because that's when 1 glass becomes 3 glasses.
Exactly.
But if I managed it with, and I was, as for you, I don't know if you still are, but quite the runner for a number of years. But managing stress with exercise, going to the gym, going for a run. I generally have dogs, take the dogs for a run, was just such a better choice.
Yeah, I remember a funny story pre-COVID. My exercise routine has changed over the years. I went from being a very good athlete as a kid. My father was a professional football player in England, where I was born and raised. So I had some good athletic genes and was always, reasonably athletic, probably above average, and played all sorts of sports when we moved to Canada. But, being exposed to baseball and, American football and ice hockey, those were all brand new. Had never experienced them. But I remember a funny exchange one day at my gym pre-COVID, because I was a gym rat pre-COVID. I've since built a home gym because after a month of COVID, I was going out of my mind not being able to exercise. But pre-COVID, someone said to me at the gym, where I would go every single day, pretty much 7 days a week, you seem to manage stress really well. How do you do it? And I said 2 things, exercise and alcohol. And the person I was talking to said, those are 2 totally inconsistent extremes. How could that possibly be? And I said, well, because after I exercise, I feel like I've earned a glass of wine, and I go home and I have a glass of wine, and then I feel guilty for having a glass of wine, which compels me to go back to the gym the next day. And then after I go back to the gym the next day, I'll pour myself a glass of wine, and then I feel guilty later on. It compels me to go to the gym the next day. So it was a bit of a vicious cycle for many years.
Yeah.
And it continues to work for the most part today.
How's your home gym? What do you have?
I have a lot now. I have a lat pull down machine. I have an Olympic bench that's an incline bench that's adjustable. I have a dip machine. I have squat racks. I have about 400 pounds of free weights. I have 3 barbells. I have dumbbells going from 15s up to 65s. So I have a pretty good selection. I've got a leg extension machine. I've got a hamstring leg curl machine.
Fancy pants.
Well, I've got a lot of
Yeah,
stuff.
fancy pants, Tim.
And it was all acquired during the first 6 months of COVID. I think I went online and sourced out a bunch of stuff. I got really fortunate in that locally there was a guy whose business was suffering. He had a foundry, and his business was suffering because during COVID everything dried up. And I found him. He was advertising online that he would make weights, and they're rough. They're not pretty looking. They're not the nice rubber hexagonal weights, but he was making plates. And I found him. And his name was Thomas. He was in St. Catharines, Ontario. And I reached out to him and I said, will you make me some barbell plates? And he said, absolutely. So it was one of those strange experiences, though, because, we've all heard about online scams. I'd only communicated with him by email. And he said, I need to buy the raw steel, though, in advance of making these plates. So I need you to wire transfer me some money. And I said, okay, how about we do this? I don't want to get scammed. So how about you send me a picture of your driver's license, and we have a virtual call, and we did, and seemed like an honest, straightforward guy. So I wire transferred him money, and 3 days later he said, your plates are here ready to be picked up. So I drove down, and he had them at his foundry. I picked them up at his place. He took them home, and I ended up buying a lot more weights from him because they were super cheap compared to going to like a Fitness Depot or something like that.
And then all the money goes to him.
Exactly.
And I like that. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and he needed it because his business was suffering early in COVID. He had no other business. He typically made gauges and pipes and so on. And of course, in March, April, and May of 2020, he had no orders. So he was happily making barbells and dumbbells and weights for people, which was interesting.
That's fantastic.
I want to talk a little bit more about leadership, if I can talk about leadership.
Please. Yeah, I'd love to hear your views on that.
So again, it's something that that sort of developed over time. As a young lawyer, I don't think I ever thought of myself as a leader. But assembling a team, of course, is a lofty goal, but I didn't realize the responsibility that comes with it. And what comes with building a team is, someone's got to be the captain of the team. And that's a great responsibility. And I've taken it very, very seriously over the years. And I always say the best way to lead is leading by example. It's do as I do, not as I say. That is far more effective. And many of my colleagues maintain that if you're the partner in the law firm, it's do as I say, not as I do. That might work for children up to age 5. But beyond that, it doesn't work for adults. It doesn't work for people who are intelligent. It doesn't work for people who are driven with A-type personalities, because it's completely hypocritical to say, do as I say. I want you to bill and docket 1,800 hours a year, but you go home at 3:00 every day and you only bill and docket 1,200 hours a year. It just is not very effective leadership style. So if you want people to follow you, you have to lead by example. You have to be kind. You have to be thoughtful as a leader. You have to communicate very effectively as a leader, and you have to be genuine. And one thing that I realized that really hit home with me during COVID was exposing vulnerability. The more you expose your own vulnerability to people that you would like to follow you, the more they buy into actually following you. If we try to remain aloof, if we're not human, if we don't expose our own vulnerability to the individuals we hope will follow us, they're not going to follow us, because it's not genuine, it's not true.
Dave, I could not agree more. I was in a situation not that long ago where someone pointed something out to me as a suggestion, and I came back with the answer. I said, oh, no, that's changed. This is it now. And they're never willing to say, good for you. You figured that. It's always a backpedal on the reason that they didn't figure that out.
Right.
Right. Oh, well, it's nice to see that information just became available. No, it didn't. It was available last week when you gave me your stupid opinion. You just didn't take the time to do it.
Right.
And it's a good person, but it's hard to respect them as a leader of their organization for that reason. Do you feel that overall the former perceived views of lawyers and firms and that sort of like top down, I'm the managing partner and then we're your senior partner, junior partner, whatever, associate, is kind of going by the wayside?
That's a really good question. It's certainly gone by the wayside with my team. I don't believe that a hierarchical structure is the best structure, and I've tried to create a community. And it applies whether it's partner, associate lawyer, paralegal, law clerk, or legal assistant. We're all sort of trying to do the same things, different roles and responsibilities, but the goal is common. And, one thing that I spearheaded here locally is continuing legal education for paralegals and law clerks, because nothing is offered. And,
saw that.
Yeah, the community in which we practice has been, wonderful for me and incredibly beneficial to me. And through the generosity of local people, the sharing of knowledge and wisdom has been remarkable. And I embraced that throughout my career. Not only did I embrace it early on, where I was the recipient of knowledge and information, as I became more senior, I wanted to give back. So I've been one of the people that I think contributes and shares the benefit of the little bit of wisdom and experience that I have. And I realized there was no forum for the people who work in the industry with us, the paralegals, law clerks, and legal assistants. There was no forum for them to do that. So I spearheaded that, and that's been incredibly successful. Now we're on our 4th seminar, and the attendance has been tremendous. The first one, there was 180 people at it. We're doing one later this week, which will be our 4th one, and it's summit success for paralegals, law clerks, and legal assistants. So I'm really proud of that as well, because it strips away some of the hierarchical structure that you were talking about, Ange. I think that hierarchy in professions, hierarchy in the workplace, there's a place for it. But if you have an engaged group of people who buy into the same things, then the need for hierarchy disappears. I don't need to have a hierarchy if the people who work with me understand what our respective roles and responsibilities are. I'm never a pull rank guy. Never, ever. In my position, I have to sometimes make a decision and make a call where people have conflicting opinions, but it's never,
sure,
I'm doing this because I have the
I'm
position.
the boss and I said so.
It's never that.
Yeah, no. I think that's such a dangerous approach, because the problem with that is the people who you're working with, if they start to feel like their voice doesn't matter, or that it doesn't matter because if you want to pull rank, you're going to pull rank anyways, or if they don't feel encouraged, or coming back to how I complimented you at the beginning, if they feel like, and you know what, sometimes they are not the most efficient opinions or whatever, but just because their first idea might not have been one you're going to implement, doesn't mean number 3 isn't going to be. And if you shut them down at number 1, you're never going to hear number 3.
Agreed.
You know, if someone's hesitant to say something because the chance that the response is going to make them feel bad about themselves, you're going to lose that person. And it's really, really dangerous for you.
Agreed. And, you know, hierarchy takes away safe space for communication in my experience.
Yeah.
And I can say to people who I work with, please tell me if you think I'm full of shit. Please tell me. I want your honest opinion. The reality is I'm not going to get an honest opinion from everyone if I'm in a hierarchical structure, because people are going to be afraid of how honesty will potentially impact them in the workplace. So I've tried to create a culture where it is a safe space. And I say to people, I'm serious about what I'm communicating. I will take your views into account. I may not always agree with them, and I may not always implement decisions that align with your decision making, but I can assure you I'll listen. I will think about the input you've given me. And then what I will do, having made a decision, is I will rationalize to those who gave me input why I might have decided something that doesn't align with their views. To the extent that I can. You know, I'm not going to get into all the business efficacies of every decision that might not be unpopular, but I will say, I thought about it. I don't think it's a good idea, and I need to consider these other things, and accordingly, we're going to proceed in this direction. But it's really important to give people feedback when you invite their input, particularly if you receive their input and you don't implement it. They're going to want to feel that you heard, you considered, and that you at least made a decision in a different direction for, you know, good reason rather than whim.
Well, because then they feel valued.
Exactly.
And they're like, okay, you know, let me see what happens next time. Someone just being shut down like that, then they're going to feel bad about themselves. And if they're a very confident person, they're in their head. They're going to be like, well, screw you, Thompson. You know, don't ask my fucking opinion again.
Exactly right. Exactly
and
right.
if they're confident, and if they're, you know, have less self-confidence in that, then they're going to walk away and be like, wow, why am I, you know, not able to do this? Or why am I not able to contribute well? Well, you are. We all have different backgrounds. We have different experiences. So I think every opinion or voice or way that we interpret things is somewhat based on our past, on our view, what happened last week, what happened when I was 7. Like that all comes in, whether it's conscious or unconscious.
Yeah, if you invite someone's input and then you completely ignore it and you don't even let them know that you were listening, that you considered it, and you don't give them any explanation, you're just treating them like a punching bag. And the next time you want input, they're just going to say, screw you, I'm not giving you my thoughts because they're not valuable. You ignored them last time. At least if you give people the comfort in knowing that their views were heard, considered, taken into account, ultimately discarded for rational reasons, then they understand and they're prepared to give you input next time.
Yeah, maybe even try harder. Funny, during a number of years ago, I did some contract work for a company, and part of it was to do exit interviews. They sold off some subsidiaries, and it did restructuring, and, you know, some people chose packages, etc., for all the reasons you do exit interviews. And the company was so smart because they chose not to do them internally. I was practicing a lot of employment law at the time, and had come to know this company for through another reason. And they brought me in to do, and I got some of the most wonderful responses from people, because the questions were, you know, summarily, you know, why did you choose not to accept the transfer, be it of a physical position, like location, or of an actual different position within the company? And then some of them were just told, thank you very much for your services. We're going to give you a very good severance package, but we can't implement it. But to hear people's responses on why they chose not to stay with the company, I mean, some were completely logical. I can't handle a 45-minute commute more than what I already have. I don't know. I'm getting married. My husband's working wherever. Like, some of them were logical, but some of them were in line with what we're talking about, that they just didn't feel that this company was a place that they saw themselves in a number of years, because they always felt like they would be a worker. They'd never be part of it.
Right. Right.
And I don't think they were referring to ownership either, because like the idea of giving away shares or profit sharing, that was never really on the table. But they didn't feel like they'd be part of it because, they came up, they stapled their papers, they put them in a pile, and then they went on to the next one. That's how they felt that their role in the company was. So whether they put the staple really, really straight or whether it was all messed up on an angle, they didn't care.
Right.
And I'm obviously not talking about staples here, but they just felt like the company in some of the positions had them going through the motions. And it worked out to be a really fantastic exercise, because at the end, they all kind of seemed to be in a certain department, and they're like, well, where other departments had more positive. And then we're like, okay, who's leading the problem department? Maybe that's who we need to be talking to, Yeah,
it's a good point. I've read a lot, particularly in the last 3 years, about employee retention, because, having gone through the pandemic, the market, certainly in the legal industry, has changed. So it's very much an employee market. There's a tremendous demand for lawyers because we can work remotely. So Toronto lost, dozens of lawyers to, the United States, and law clerks and legal assistants can now work remotely, so they don't need to be local. And I've read an awful lot about employee retention, and what I've gathered through reading the various studies is that employee retention, compensation is only part of employee retention. Feeling empowered, feeling valuable, feeling worthwhile in the workplace are just as important. And most of the studies show that an engaged, happy employee will not leave for an alternate position for like a 10% increase. It's going to take a lot more than that to get someone to leave.
Yeah.
So having camaraderie with co-workers is enormously important. Being engaged. People also want their views to generally align with the views of the organization that they're working for. So if someone is a very charitable person who cares about dogs, for example, and is a big supporter of the SPCA, if the organization, promotes activities where you get to bring your dog, if the organization contributes to the SPCA, that person is, their views and their principles, their core values are aligned with those of the organization. They're much more likely to be loyal and to stay than to leave for a 20% job increase, where the organization has no interest in the SPCA or having dogs at its events.
I feel like that comment was based on your examples were based on some inside information.
a little bit. And as a dog lover, that's important to me. And I've had days at the office where I encourage people to bring their dogs in, which is a little bit unusual. I've also, I do nature walks a couple of times a year. We go to a conservation area. Anyone who wants to attend, and everyone is encouraged to bring their dogs, because it makes for a fun event.
I had a foster dog a couple years ago, and Greg, Malia, we're both big dog people. So we're in the office, and he's like, "Where's Rocco?" I was like, "Well, this one's biting people, so I can't really bring him here. He's not biting me. He's very protective of me, but he's biting people." And Greg's like, "Screw it, bring him anyways. I want to meet Rocco." I was like, "I didn't care because he's a dog guy."
Yeah, that's awesome.
Oh, that's what I was going to comment on. You know what I heard the best thing to do for employee retention? If you book an entire box at a Leafs game and you bring all the people and you pilfer them with food and booze, apparently they never quit. Rumor is it that someone in the city did that.
I did do that.
And just filled it with like 30 people.
I did do that. But more important than that, and it's
Well, did the Leafs win that night? That's more important than that.
They did win that game, yes. That was much better than the recent playoff disappointment. But what I've tried to do is a series of events that just promote engagement. We've done bowling nights. We've done those nature walks. We do a kayaking trip with our team. We all kayak down the Grand River together. We've had barbecues together. We obviously have a Christmas party. But it's oftentimes they're not extravagant or expensive things that make people feel engaged. Like the first year during COVID, the first thing that I did, realizing that I was incredibly disconnected from my team about 6 months into COVID, was I ordered apple pies from a local bakery that's out in the country. I went personally and picked them all up, and I delivered them to 35 employees on their front porches because, people were still socially distant. So everyone got an apple pie for Thanksgiving. And, not incredibly expensive, but I felt two things. I felt that it was important to connect, and I felt that it was important for me as one of the partners on the team to do it myself as opposed to sending someone to deliver them. Because what my team wanted was a tiny little bit of FaceTime, even if we're 10 feet apart on a front porch. And they wanted to know they were important enough to me that I went to the bakery, picked up the 35 pies, put them in my car, and then drove all around the city to deliver them.
Did you have a map beforehand? So I know you did.
I did.
Logically, 100%.
100%.
And you measured, I don't doubt it.
Yeah, I had to.
I guess my only question now is, are you hiring? I like Leafs game and apple pies.
and kayaking and Christmas parties.
And kayaking, and all of the rest.
Winery tours and bowling nights.
And bowling night,
all of the different things that we've tried to do to just maintain engagement. And as I said, they're not lavish, they're not necessarily expensive. But it's the nature walk costs nothing, right? What I do is I go to Tim Hortons and buy a bunch of coffees and Timbits. So the cost is nominal, but everyone gathers at Sanctuary Park. We all park in that little parking lot and walk the Dundas Valley Trail. And
what a nice trail.
It's a gorgeous trail, and people bring their dogs.
Yeah.
And it's a shit show because there's 30 dogs running up and down the trail that are unleashed, which usually is unpopular with other people using the trail. But, it makes, it's innocent. It makes for a fun afternoon for people for a couple hours.
Well, plus, you got 20 lawyers with you. Someone can come up with an argument on why it's permissible.
That's very true. Very true.
Yeah. Dave, thank you so much for your time today. It's been incredibly enjoyable conversation, and maybe I'll see you out on the water. I think I'm going to go kayaking the next couple of weeks myself.
That sounds wonderful. Well, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure chatting, and I'm definitely going to get out on the water very, very soon. I'm hankering to get out there. I almost pulled the kayak out, put it on top of the car yesterday, but I whipped out because it got a little cold and a little chilly and a little windy, so I didn't do it. But next weekend, I am on the water for sure.
You're out there. Fantastic. Dave, thanks so much. Have a fantastic afternoon.
Thanks, Angie, too.